Hi, this is Kalyan Karmakar here, and welcome to another episode of Foodocracy for Her. Foodocracy for Her is where I speak to women entrepreneurs in the world of food and beverage and hospitality in India so far, and it's about their amazing stories and very very different fields that they come from. And we've got a very special guest today. We've got Gauri Devidayal. So she's part of the team. She and her husband Jay Yousuf. They've got a lot of big brands. And some huge success stories. And the most famous, of course, is the table, which I think has, in a way, played a big role in redefining the Indian restaurant industry. And it's also the 10th birthday or anniversary of the table. Though it just seems like it's been there forever because that's what a class act is. But I think it's really sort of entered our lives, not only in the city but in the country, and it's become a destination restaurant with people coming in from abroad wanting to visit it. So welcome on board, Gauri. And
Thank you so much for having me, Kalyan, and for all the kind words.
No, absolute pleasure. And first of all, like big congrats to you and Jay and to the entire team on the fabulous work which you've done on table and many other things as well. So many congrats.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that was a part of the interview where I spoke. After this, I'm going to try to speak very little, and it's going to be yours from now. But Gauri, tell me, how did the table happen? Is that your first foray into hospitality business?
Yeah, so actually, I'm a lawyer and a chartered accountant by profession.
Oh my God! I must interject. Sorry. So that means that so the Pooja is a former lawyer. Then I don't know if you know Amul Farooq of Sugar and Overdose, and then there's our Kaina's Miss One. I think that she also wanted to be a lawyer. So there's something about lawyers and
I guess it's the it's the natural next step. What can I say, right?
Yes.
So I mean, I read law at university, and then I went into tax consulting with one of the big four accounting firms, and I was there for about 8, almost 9 years. And around sort of about year 7 is when I met Jay, when I just moved back to Bombay. And he's also not from hospitality. So it literally was like the blind leading the lame, frankly, into this venture. But he just sold his business and was like, I don't want to do that. He's a techie. And he was like, I don't want to do that anymore. I've always wanted to open a restaurant. And I was like, okay, this is a midlife crisis that I'm just going to, I'm going to sort of let this pass. And, but he kept kind of, sort of pursuing it. And I was working full time at that point. And I started helping out just literally, I was like, okay, let me make sure you're not like signing all your wealth away or something. Like, I'll review the legal documents. I'll help you with like getting, the company set up. And, literally where my expertise kind of lay was where I intended to, restrict my involvement to. But I don't know. I mean, I kept kind of obviously giving my input on various aspects, and slowly before I knew it, it was like having 2 full-time jobs. So I decided that, I would quit one. And that happened to be obviously my accounting sort of profession. But I kind of saw it at that point as taking a sabbatical for a year. And I said, look, worst case, I'll go back to it. But like you said, 10 years later, and it's been a bit of a long sabbatical, let's just say.
But was it scary at that point? Because even I used to be in market research, and after about 12 or 13 years, I took a sabbatical. And the idea was to get back into market research and try a bit of food writing. And it was a bit scary, especially at that point where one did not know how to sort of start a career as a food writer. And it did take me into some very dark places before I came out of it, thankfully. But was it scary for you as well?
So, I have to say, all credit to Jay. I don't think I would have, ditched everything to open a restaurant by myself. So it was very much, me sort of kind of piggybacking on his risk-taking nature. And I sort of just felt like I said, like, I felt like, look, what have I got to lose in taking a year off? And I'd been, I'd spent so many years in doing what I was doing that I was quite confident that I'd be able to get back into it if things didn't work out. So yeah, it's probably the most risky thing I've done in my life, because of course, as an accountant by nature, I'm the most risk averse person there.
Yes, of course,
Which is
yes.
actually it's a great counter for the
Yeah.
two of us, because I'm always bashing down his ideas as saying they're completely unviable. But yeah, I think you're right. It is it is scary, but I think it's also and especially with the restaurant business, it's something where I say this to a lot of people who want to get into the industry,
Yeah.
that you need to have, the reality is you need to have deep pockets, because no matter how much you budget for it, there's always things that you don't anticipate. And so Jay had kind of, like, he'd done well, he just sold his business, so he was like, okay, look, I'm putting aside this kitty and that's what I want to do. So because there was this, we didn't kind of feel like, okay, we've got we were just like, okay, let's do this, like, wholeheartedly, get into it, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, right? But so I think that once you make that decision and you take that plunge, then you kind of have to go into it like all guns blazing. And I think that's what we did, right? And like I said, because I felt like I had this backup plan if things didn't pan out,
Yeah.
then it didn't seem as scary. It actually, to the contrary, it was quite an exciting adventure.
But what I
Till
also
obviously till actually things started going wrong, and then we were like, what the hell? Yeah.
we'll come to that later.
Yeah.
But what I also found interesting is that before people just think that it's fine if you have a plan B, but also the word which you use, wholeheartedly. That you said that when you're going to be in this, you're going to be in it like for full time. Like, I mean, like leaving a job was a big statement of intent. I think that's also a very important thing, right? That no half
Yeah, it
measures.
was, but I really, I feel like I had a really good, I left on a really good note with my employers, and I think that's all. They were very supportive, and they were like, we don't want you to go, but go for it.
Yeah,
And
blessing.
that's where I think that if you're good at what you do, then you will always figure a way out, and that's the
True.
thing. But yeah.
No, you spoke about good in what you do. I think that also one very important thing when you're doing something is like what in our MBA days we read off when it comes to companies as a mission statement, and nowadays a word which is used a lot, and I strongly believe in it, which is purpose or objective. So whether you're doing something in your own life or the business you're setting up, or your work sphere, I think defining, like even an article with Pooja Dhingra had written about how defining why she's in it sort of helped her circumvent the challenges of the lockdown. So when you guys started the table, I mean, apart from the fact that wanting to start a restaurant, was there a certain vision which you had in mind that what you wanted it to be?
So I'll be honest, Kalyan, there were a lot of things that changed along the way
Yes,
once we started. And that's the nature of this business, that you sometimes
yes,
you go in with one thing and things don't work out the way you intended, and you kind of have to
yes.
adjust and adapt. And so we actually, for the longest time, thought we were going to open a patisserie. We felt like that was lacking in Bombay back in whatever
Hmm.
2009 when we started this project. And then along the way, we realized, as we we did more homework, that you couldn't get the right flour, butter, things like that,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
really would be the quality of what we were endeavoring to do. And so then we were like, okay, let's not just force something that's not feasible at this point. And so we and the whole idea was to there was always this. So Jay lived in San Francisco for about 15 years
Oh,
before moving to Bombay. So, and that was the one thing that he missed the most about that city, was the food.
yeah.
And so, it was always like, I want to bring a bit of that back to Bombay. I want to do, and that was always this thing playing in the back of his mind. So eventually, as we ended up doing a restaurant that was very sort of San Francisco inspired. And
Yes,
a lot of
yes.
people ask me, what does that mean? And, essentially that basically is that, I guess the culture of that cuisine is that it's ingredient driven. It's, it's not partial to any one specific cuisine, but rather that the ingredient is the star and the king, and that's what the food revolves around, and it takes inspiration from cuisines all around the world. And so that's basically the philosophy of what we did. But coming back to purpose, I think I'll be honest, we didn't really think about it that sort of formally when we ventured into this. I think we were just driven by the idea of bringing something of a really high standard to the city. And because neither of us were from a hospitality background, like a formal hospitality background, it was basically driven by what we would want in an ideal restaurant if we were diners there, right? So literally from every aspect of like, the menu to the look and feel to the even the way the menu is printed to, every aspect, it was like, what do I want when I go to a restaurant? And that was literally the only kind of guidance we had, was what we wanted. And so I think it was literally just drawn. I mean, the driving factor was this idea to bring, and you have to remember, like, whatever, now 12 years ago, which is when we started conceptualizing this.
Yes.
The whole dining sort of scene in the city was completely
Very
different from what it is
Yes,
today, right?
yes,
So
yes,
there was definitely room for a lot, and
yes.
I think that's what we were sort of driven by. But so I think beyond that, and as sort of basic as that sounds in terms of a vision for the space, there wasn't sort of a defined purpose. But obviously over the years, as we've kind of been sort of spent so much time in this industry and done more things, we have come to understanding what it is that we're trying to contribute to the dining scene of the city. And so in terms of like a more thought through purpose, I think that's sort of something that we've understood better ourselves over time. But
So I'm going to
yeah,
come to,
that's
no, I'm going to come to that in a moment. But I found it really interesting what you said, and I think that that's also going to give I think a lot of people sort of a bit of hope, because sometimes it might get a bit overwhelming to hear about purpose, because the truth is, like you said, one doesn't always have clarity in terms of what one does. So first of all, I must say that coming in with the San Francisco sort of food like 10, 12 years back was, I think, way ahead of its time. I think now, because of programs like Somebody Feed Phil, or a bit of no reservations, this, that, whatever. Now we're slowly, and we've also got exposed to a lot more. So we now know what the San Francisco subculture is versus, say, Chicago, New York, and all of that. But I think it was way ahead of your time. But I also think, I mean, when I was listening to you, I was thinking of my own journey. So I began blogging or food writing 13 years back in 2007. And it was exactly the same thing which you said, that one was, I was in research. So I wanted a bit of a creative outlet from work. So I used to call my day job my Clark Kent self. So you know what the other thing meant. I mean, not most humble of people, I guess. But it, I would see a lot of content on television and magazine on food and restaurants, and it didn't really excite me, whatever I'd come across. Then I would see, No Reservations, read the book as well, see a bit of, Jamie Oliver. There was a Harsha Bhogle travel show, 1 or 2 episodes. Then I read Chitrita Banerjee's book on Bengali food. And suddenly, and then I got hold of Root Food by V. Sangvi, Simon Majumdar's Eat My Globe. And I realized that this is the sort of content which I like to read. I mean, just as you said, the sort of restaurant you'd like to be in. And I said that, let me write about the sort of thing which I would like to read. And I started writing. And I'm going to tell you that the first few years, it was just that. It was just wanting to write and talk about restaurants in a way which I would like to listen to. And that was it. And that's what made it tough when I moved into food writing, because I didn't really have clarity of what I wanted to do. And then I would see people around me, and there were people doing fabulous work. Someone wanted to document, say, healthy vegetarian food. Someone wanted to document Maharashtrian food. Someone wanted to document the history of food. And I was a bit, which I must say, a bit like, and I know it's a big comparison, but a bit like the table menu. If you see, I mean, the table menu, you can't really typecast as Italian, French, Korean, whatever. There is a bit of everything. So I think that, there's a word, polyglot, which one of my interviews used. I think that that's, and then with time, I think I sort of then realized that I wanted to write about food from different cultures. That's also when I started practicing Buddhism, and Buddhism was a lot about peace and harmony. So that's when I started my food walks. My book was about that. And then when the lockdown happened, which was last year, then it was more about sort of trying to give a bit of hope and joy with people who would interact with my writing. But what I took out of what you said is that even such a successful phenomena like Table and then Max Street Kitchen and so many other things which you've done, in the beginning just started with wanting to do something which you would like to see or experience, which itself is not a bad place to start, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's so important that there's integrity behind the motive in terms of, and people often use the word passion and, things like that. But I think it's not about, I think more than passion, there has to be sincerity in
Yes.
the reason for doing this,
That's very nice.
because it's a long journey. It's not something that you're going to have overnight success over possibly. And so you really have to be in it for the long haul and believe in what you're doing and why you're doing it to stick it out.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting. I mean, I was always thinking in terms of passion, but sincerity is because from what I got to know about both you and Jay and your lives and your your previous lives as tax consultants or business folks and all that. I'm sure at many points it would have been tempting to get back to your old lives to put in maybe less effort, have less adventure, maybe make more money. I don't know, but
Definitely
at
make
that
more
point,
money.
no, but so I think at that point it's this sincerity which really helps. I mean, I'm talking a bit from my own life as well, and I know it's a very big comparison compared to what you guys have done, but sometimes you need that to keep you. I mean, it's far more tempting to do other stuff, but it's also important,
Yeah, I
I
mean, it's
feel,
that
that for
thing
brands
of,
to evolve
yeah, I
to
mean,
like what you
it's
said.
grass
Yeah,
is always greener, and
yeah.
there's all those things, and obviously when the going gets tough, it's you kind of the first instinct is to feel like you want out. But it's so funny because this business is one where, I mean, trust me, it took us a long time to before we started seeing any sort of money in the bank, and but it was so strange because even if you're not doing that, even if you're not sort of financially successful, when a guest or a diner says instantly that the experience they've had and they share that joy with you, I mean, I know this sounds really cliched and it sounds like maybe I'm exaggerating this, but it really does make up for it. I mean, of course, you have to, at the end of the day, pay salaries, you have to pay rent, you have to figure out how to do all of that. But it really kind of keeps you going. Like you don't, you won't believe it. It's really the fuel for this business. And it's one of those things where, unlike maybe a lot of other industries, it's one where you get instant gratification or not. So you also get instant
Big
that
bets.
response and reaction, right? It's not something that you'll try over and then maybe like you'll buy something, you'll have it like a week later and then you'll like think about it. It's like literally so I think if I sort of actually sit to define what keeps us going and what we feel gives us joy, it's that it's basically seeing that reaction from people of delight from having a meal at the restaurant or at home or whatever. And I can't sort of sort of tell you enough how much that that really is the fuel to our energy.
I can completely sort of relate to it because, I mean, if I take it to the most basic form of writing, which I do, which is say blogging or Instagramming or whatever, over there, like, seeing a single reader comment saying that they liked it or they could relate to it or this thing gives you so much joy. So when you're putting together such a gargantuan operation and with so many lives involved. And it's not just, I mean, at one level, and I think the most fundamental level is the response from the diner, but also the fact is that you've created something which is a bit of an ambassador for Mumbai, because when people think of modern Mumbai and the food scene, I mean, one of the first things which come to mind is the table, and which in a way I feel, I remember a long time back having a chat and a panel discussion with Riaz Amlani was one of the folks there, and we were talking about Mumbai food, and he made me realize, and I think it's a very valid point, that it's also important to realize that Mumbai is probably the most progressive and forward or open cities of India, and the fact that there are many Mumbai. So there is a Irani restaurant Mumbai, Mangalorean Mumbai, Udupi Mumbai, Varapa Mumbai, but there is also this world city, the headquarters of Unilever, and where Pricewaterhouse is, that top filmmakers and stuff, and this represents that, because otherwise the city gets frozen in time, which is not I think right or fair to Mumbai. Now tell
No, I
me
mean, I
that
think any city
yes,
has to
yes,
evolve, and with
yes,
that, hopefully, its dining scene as well. Yeah.
yeah. So tell me, a bit earlier you were saying that with time, as you've evolved and the restaurant has evolved, you now have some clarity in terms of where you guys want to go, whether it's purpose or however you want to define it. Something you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that, happened maybe I would say 5 or 6 years ago. So so the table opened in 2011, January 2011. And after about a year of, getting that settled, year and a half, so everyone was like, what next? And the sort of expectation from us was to open a second restaurant in the city, possibly in North Bombay, and, just sort of, yeah, I mean, that was the obvious next thing to do. And of course, we did look at spaces and, but nothing kind of struck a chord. And it just wasn't something that I think we were doing it because it was the expectation rather than maybe what was actually driving us. And then sort of and we spent a good, I would say 2 or 3 years doing this. And then the space that's now known as Magazine Street Kitchen,
Yes.
Which is it was an old decrepit warehouse in the middle of frankly nowhere, but now
Yes.
is better known as Ray Road and Baikala
Railroad.
area. And this space sort of fell into our lap, and obviously it was not meant for a restaurant, given the location, etc. But it really kind of got us thinking about, and the thing with Bombay especially is that space is such a rare commodity, right? Finding finding real estate and the right kind of real estate for what you want to do is so hard. So this space happened to fall into our lap, and we were like, what can we do? I mean, there's potential here for something, and that's when the idea of this, and one of our biggest learnings in the first few years of running the restaurant was that there was really a dearth of places where you could, sort of students either coming out of culinary school or people who wanted to get into it but maybe not go into culinary school, like a great sort of training platform for students who wanted to go deeper into the art of culinary. And this was also around the time when like MasterChef Australia was like really taking off in India, and like everyone was kind of dabbling with cooking in the kitchen, and I'm sure like YouTube was also taking off at this point and things. So we were kind of like, I guess, a little bit inspired by the idea of doing something, creating a space where people could learn, but it could also like double up as a as a maybe like a back end kitchen for us, and things like that. So the idea then, the minute we started shifting away from doing a restaurant, we basically it was like the world was our oyster as far as what we could do. And I think that's when we realized that what we really get excited by is the idea of doing something different and bringing something new to the city, and while we didn't know that's what we wanted to do
Yes.
with the table. And of course, yes, we did want to do that, but that, that was what was exciting us. I think when we started working on Mag Street, we realized that, we didn't want to just take I wouldn't say safe route, because it's not fair to say, doing even a second or third or 10th restaurant is easy. But it was maybe a little more obvious. And but what really kind of excited us was bringing something new again to the city, and not just as by way of a restaurant, but a culinary experience. And that could have been in terms of cooking, it could have been in terms of dining, etc. And I think that's how Mag Street evolved. It took us 2 years. It wasn't, and just like the table, it took us 14 months, which is crazy, like time in sort of restaurant time, when you've got rents and things. That's like, that's killer amount of time to take for a restaurant. But with Mag Street Kitchen, we were fortunate that we didn't have a high rent or anything, so we really took our time to figure it out. And I think without trying to be different for the sake of it, we did end up bringing a unique experience to the city. And again, the joy that happens when people who've got lost and spent like all this time trying to find it, and they still come in and they're like blown away, and they don't want to kill us. Yeah, I mean, you were one of like everyone. Get in line. It's I think again that was where we just felt like, okay, it's and the funny thing is, with both the table and with Mag Street, we faced a lot of resistance to the idea. So with the table, of course, because it was our first venture, everyone was like, are you crazy? Like, neither of you know what you're doing. And, and with Mag Street as well, they were like, who's going to come here? It's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you're spending all this money. Like, is this really the smart thing to do? And I don't know, but like, I mean, of course, like, I'm like, oh God, like, is that possibly true? And then Jay, I think, almost gets fueled by that, because he's just like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. But I feel that as we kind of, and then of course we did, I mean, just another example, we did Misty as well, and the idea was to bring Vietnamese food to Vietnamese and Burmese food to Bombay, which there was sort of very little of at that time. I think there was just Burma, which was vegetarian. And I mean, that restaurant didn't take off the way we expected, but again, it was driven by the idea of bringing a cuisine that we loved to the city, and doing something different. So I don't think I think, if I have to kind of now identify it, it's just to bring new experiences to the city in a really high quality in a way that hopefully will last a long time. And that's basically what I think excites us.
I'm going to come to that in a minute, but since you brought up the question of Misty, and you did an interview with A.D. Singh on his journey on your podcast. This round is on me. So I want to ask you a similar question, because I mean, since you guys are justifiably icons, what you've done, role models. Any learnings from the Misty experience? Because I remember going with Kainaz, my wife, I think maybe a year down the line when it had opened, and at night, and it was on a weekday, and it was really empty. But we did bump into a couple of friends, and there were 2 or 3 tables full. But beat the experience, because we were looking for like a nice private dinner, and it almost felt like you were sort of in an oyster's shell, and the food was exquisite. I remember but it was also the sort of food which is like you need to sit and savour. It's more like a date meal, is something which I felt, or something that it's not like you. Any thoughts on like, or any learnings from that?
Oh my God, there were
adventure?
there were tons
it
of
was brilliant food.
and thank you.
Food.
No, I mean, I think one of the things was that so it was really funny. It was our first, so we did this partnered with the boys from Woodside, as you know, and great guys, and I think that we all had this vision for the space, but it was the first project where we had external investors.
The Colaba cartel.
Yes,
cartel.
Also a podcast.
Yes.
And so if anyone wants to know what went into the making of that restaurant, rather than what went into the breaking of that restaurant, tune into that podcast. But I think it was the first time we had external investors, and I know for Jay and me, I can speak for Jay and me. It was the first time where we took decisions that were possibly financially driven as opposed to purely sort of concept driven. And we possibly did things that we would not have done if it was just us and we didn't have this sort of almost pressure to not delay, not sort of overspend, etc. Because we did that with the table, for example. We went way over budget, and we took decisions that we possibly wouldn't have done if we were answerable to other people. But I think those decisions like held us in really good stead. Like, even for example, changing our architect halfway and gutting everything that we'd done and starting from scratch. We paid the architect, we paid contractors, we were paying rent, and it was a really tough decision to make, but it resulted in the space being what it is today. But I think with Misty we didn't do that, and I think some of those things kind of backfired. So even with the menu, we were probably like 85-90% happy with it when we opened, but we were just like, we've got to open, we've gone ahead of the sort of budgeted time, etc. And Bombay is one of those cities, and I can't speak for how it is elsewhere, but Bombay is one of those cities that's very sort of, I wouldn't say unforgiving, I think that sounds negative, but they're very quick to judge and decide, and just like word of mouth can work in your favor, it can also work against you. And I think that's what happened. In all honesty, I think that the expectation was so high because it was our second restaurant after the table. And in the beginning I was just like, why do people expect, like, and at that time the table was 8 years old, to be overnight to be exactly like the table. The table's taken us 8 years or whatever, however many years to get to where it is. And and so I was kind of like a little like sort of I demotivated, I guess, by that. But then it was a learning, because I'm like, that's what the diner's expecting. So you can sit there and mope about it, or you can you can read the writing on the wall and do something about it. So of course we worked on it over the coming year and over the year after it opened, and we made a lot of improvements, and we felt really happy with the menu. But by then obviously there was a certain view of that restaurant that people had, and it's very hard to get people to come back and give a restaurant a second chance. So I think that's what happened there. And but the funny thing is that during lockdown, because we were really actually happy with the menu by the time we decided to close the restaurant, during lockdown we revived it as a delivery brand, and we've had like phenomenal feedback on that.
I can imagine
reordering. So we're like, it's unfortunate that it happened the way it did in the restaurant, but we're glad that it's still there in some shape or form. And we never know, like, you never know when how it might kind of what avatar it might take in the coming years. But so I think that the important thing is, firstly, that especially with the restaurant business where you don't get second chances, you really need to be 100% sure of, and happy and convinced about every aspect of what you're doing when you finally open your doors. And also we realized after the space opened and, people came into the space and it got used, that there were certain sort of design factors that didn't work and things. So actually after we closed the restaurant in November 19, we spent the next 4 months working on redoing the space, based on learnings that we'd had, as well as pivoting the concept to a Cantonese restaurant.
Cantonese, yes.
And and so we reopened it as a restaurant called May 13, which unfortunately opened only 10 days before lockdown, and so didn't see much of the light of day. And we're still trying to get the chefs back in now, but into the country. But so I mean, I I just feel like, I mean, like AD and I were chatting on the show, it's such a amazing learning experience. Of course, it's an expensive one, but you can't let it bring you down. You
True.
really have to, just learn from it and get up and keep going. And that's the important thing. It's business at the end of the day. It's not a life or death situation. And I think if you don't have those mistakes, then you just keep thinking that you're sort of invincible, and that's not sort of the best approach to running a business. So I think it was just a great, very, a really good lesson for us on so many levels, not just F&B, but even in terms of how to work in a partnership, how to work with
Yes.
investors, all of that. So yeah, I'm sort of, it was a part of the journey. Yeah.
But thanks for sharing so candidly with us, because like, while most of us who are watching this podcast or this episode might not be running restaurants, but in things which we do in our this thing, everyone would have faced failures and often got into things with a lot of high hopes and expectations, and anything. It could even be like something to do with health or relationship or whatever, and then
Sure.
it went south. But like you said, I mean, sometimes you just have to sort of cut your losses and get up and do it.
Yeah.
And you know what? And folks like you and AD even more are so experienced in this field. Like I again remember Riaz saying this quite some time back, because see, Riaz operates in various cities through through social smokehouse, some soda bottle is reducing. But what he was saying is that the Mumbai market is the most unforgiving. So like
Yeah.
even Mohit, when he was with Soda Bottle Opener Wala and AD, they brought it in last to Mumbai. And it's true, because as a diner, as a Mumbai diner, I must confess that the fact that we have rather busy
The
lives where
original.
time is at a premium,
Yeah.
and two is that there are so many options that you just want to move on. So it's a bit tough to be on the other side. But there have been cases where I've had a bad experience in the beginning with someone, and I've just not gone back, because there are other options, and life is also getting busy. And this thing of first impressions is also very interesting, because when Table opened, which is 10 years back, at that time there was still a lot of word of mouth from diners, which would make or break a restaurant. Like, for example, our common friend Ranjit, like he's a big fan of the Table, and we got to know each other more or less at that time. So his sort of reaction to it, messages and all that would make us go there, and we would ask him what to order. But in recent years, in the last few years, it's been so much about getting a group of people over and this thing, and I was judging the reactions to Misty before we went for dinner, which was a year later, and a couple of the other Asian restaurants which had opened at the same time, and I must say, and I think I told you also later, that the feedback on Misty was a bit lukewarm, to put it politely. But when I had my dinner, I then realized that this is not the sort of place where you can come with a group of people and keep photographing and get to understand the food. So I do hope that this culture sort of dissolves a bit, and restaurant. I remember Alex, who was your head chef in the beginning. He'd once written that why are people so quick to judge a restaurant? I think in Mumbai Boss he'd written about. I want
Yeah.
to
I
ask about
mean,
that also. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I think that you can't sit and dictate how people should respond to the food, and you have to
Mm.
kind of you have to listen. But I do feel that it's one important thing that is a big learning for me, and not a learning, but it's something that we've always believed, is that you can't please everyone. And
Yes.
if you create something that you think is going to please everyone, you're probably going to please no
Yeah.
one. So
Yes.
it's really about, again, being true to the concept that you have in mind and doing it to the best of your ability, and let the cards fall where they may, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, they're bound to be other people who feel the same way as you, and hopefully there'll be enough of them that makes it a viable business.
And that's reassuring at many counts, because if you see the Foodocracy for Her series, first of all, it focuses only on women. Two is it's an hour long thing. Three is it's in English. So it's everything which they say is against what succeeds in content today. But if this is something one believes in, I mean, it might not get you the sort of numbers, but at least it gives you the satisfaction. I want to ask you, take you to two particular sort of steps or this thing in your journey. And I'm simply doing this because, I mean, the entire sort of thing which you guys have built up is such a role model that I think there's a lot of learning for people aspiring to grow big. And, one should have the biggest dreams. So one is about table. And, when it started, you had Alex as your chef, and a big part of the identity was Alex, because you and Jay were, took a step back and said that we are the people behind it, but or that's how it came across at least, that it's his baby. Then a few years later, I mean, he moved on. I'm not too sure for whatever the reason, but he moved on. But and I'm sure there must have been questions as to what table will do and things like that. And I happen to have gone back for I think 2 or 3 meals to table. One was just after the transition, and where I saw that it was quite a good act. And then I went back at least a couple of times more. And what struck me, and it's nothing to do with Alex, I think it's more the growth. But I think that with each meal, I felt that my food experience at table was getting better and better. So I want to know, how did you guys sort of, take the journey ahead?
So, it's funny, you're actually, a few people have said that to us, and I'm really kind of grateful, and I'm very sort of happy to hear that for various reasons. But I think also because for us, it was the first time. So, as first time restaurateurs, and obviously Alex was very much a part of the table, from the get go. And so when, that person kind of is no longer part of it, of course you question sometimes, or like, and it doesn't help that the whole outside world is questioning it as well. But actually the funny thing is that he'd actually taken a year off when he went to work with
Yes.
11 Madison Park, sort of a few years before he actually finally left. And I think that was the time when we actually felt the real sort of I wouldn't say insecurity, but like we were like a little like nervous about it. And not just us, like our whole team, but what we did at that point was that, we gave our chefs, hey, it's never a one-man show. There's a whole team that goes into, running a restaurant, whether the kitchen, front of house. And, full kudos to the team that was, that had trained under Alex and, were running the show when he left the first time. And our role as sort of non-chef restaurateurs was basically to give them 100% support in any aspect that they needed, and also to just constantly give them feedback on the food. But the funny thing is that they'd been the ones doing it all along, so there wasn't really anything that, it was more, I think, handling the outside perception. And so that first time, after, I think it was about after 3 or 4 years, I can't remember now exactly, when he'd taken that year off and happened to come back. So the second time when it happened, it was like, we were like, we've been there, done this. We know we're capable of it. And the important thing was just to not only keep up the quality, but also continue innovating. And so we had Chef John Solari, who is from Philadelphia, and he would sort of come back and forth. He was traveling around Asia at that time. So it was great because he would, come back, spend a few months with us, carry on, and then come back. And, so it was an amazing, way for the restaurant to evolve. And so I think that was it, and as restaurateurs, that was our, I guess, our key responsibility was to ensure that quality didn't drop and that innovation continued, and I think that, and eventually, you can't sit there and, like I said earlier, you can't dictate how people should respond. In the same way, we were like, we can't sit there and keep telling people, no, nothing's changed. They have to come and feel that way for themselves. And like you said, word of mouth is, I keep telling my, Ria, whom who handles our PR and marketing, I keep saying to her, and I've said this to everyone who has, been in her position before her, that the biggest PR marketing that you can ever get is word of mouth,
Yes,
and
yes,
no
yes,
amount of money or
yes, yes,
anything in relations can buy that. That's as
yes.
honest as it gets, and that's as sort of big as it gets. So focus on that, and in order to kind of make that happen, you have to focus on your product and the experience. So I say this to my team all the time, that just focus on doing what we need to do, and it'll fall into place. And it's definitely not the norm. I think I get bashed a lot for not following the sort of convention on
But you're also a bit outspoken. Being outspoken
yeah, but I
gets.
think that, I mean, whatever. I'm sort of, that's me. Take it or leave it. No, I think that there's no right way of doing something, but I do like to share my sort of experience and my
Well, you
sort of
should. You
thoughts
should.
on something. Yeah.
You should. You should. And I
Yeah.
must say, the fact that I don't know whether this has anything to do from the fact that we come from a business or an accounting background, but I used to be in market research and we used to do brand tracking studies, and we were doing that at the time of the financial crisis, and I was working on the banking sector where I was in Nielsen there, and then we saw that the biggest driver for brand trust was word of mouth. Like at that time, not so much social media, but not mass media, not print, not TV, anything like that. But if your friend, neighbor, colleague said that this is a banquet, you would go there. And I must say that my wife Kana, she's in advertising and she's in creative. And if I look at chefs in a restaurant space as being the creative department, then she would love to have a business management team like you and Jay, because who was saying that we are backing you. You focus on the product. We'll take care of the outside world, and let's do a great job together. And I think that that's the backbone for a. And then, like you said, the partnership. Like even the fact that you and Jay sort of bring in different dimensions. I think that's so important. But second
Well,
question
that's
which I
why we
wanted to.
managed to stay married.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Yeah, the second question which I wanted to ask you, and it struck me when a few days back I saw this very nice gesture from, should I say the Mumbai canteen or get the Bombay canteen where they sort of,
Yeah. That
use
was
their
very sweet.
lettering board to say that happy 10th, the table or to something to that effect. Now, a brand like yours, which has sort of built and started rolling towards success and all of that, and then I'm trying to get the importance of the environment and how does that affect you. So midway through your run came maybe Bombay Canteen, a bit before that Masala Library, and in Delhi Indian Accent, and suddenly the focus became on Indian food and the world of Indian food, like our Prime Minister says, local for vocal, no, vocal for local, and and
Yeah.
and we were beginning to sort of open our eyes to the wealth of Indian food. So either like folks like Som who are doing it the traditional way, or folks like Bombay Canteen who are making us rethink about Indian food, but in a very grounded manner. So at that time, was there a temptation, or was there a worry that we've taken this world cuisine, San Francisco, then Cantonese, Burmese, Thai route, and the world seems to be asking for something else? Do we just turn around? What is the sort of thoughts there in your mind? I mean, you did come up with Iktara. So was there any temptation at that point, Gauri, to sort of change tracks because the movement seemed to be towards Indian? And I'm sure you agreed that it's a justifiable movement. But was there any? Did you guys start second guessing yourselves then? If you know what I mean.
So Kalyan, I'll be honest. I mean, the boys at the canteen, and every all these other restaurants that have opened over the last few years that have done phenomenally well are. I mean, that wasn't the first one, right? There was
Yes.
Ellipsis that opened, I think, a couple of years after we did, which was also hugely popular, and a bunch of restaurants, right? But I
Yes.
think that the important thing for us was that, hey, there's always going to be something else happening, around the corner or in the city, and you can't build your brand and build your concept looking over your shoulder. You have to be looking forward, and you have to be focused on what you're doing. And if you keep trying to pivot every time sort of
Yes.
something comes along, what do you stand for, and what is your brand all about? So, I've believed that the whole time that, and honestly, I don't have time to keep up with what's happening around me.
Yes, yes,
Because,
yes.
I get asked this so often in interviews about, what are the trends, and, what do you all sort of, this ingredient's trending. And I'm just like, a trend is fleeting by definition, and
Yes,
we're
yes.
here for the long haul. So I'm
Wow.
not sitting there and saying what's trending and should I be putting it on, and because what happens when that trend dies? Like, am I
Yes.
going to be outdated, or um, and the whole idea with a restaurant, I mean, you mentioned restaurants like Som and the Swati, and there's
Yes.
places that we all go back to, like,
Yes. Links
time and time
Pavilion.
again, and we go back for that
Yes.
familiarity, for that, and so that's what really a restaurant foundation is built on. It's about
True.
a really solid concept that that is timeless, hopefully, and
Yeah.
can surpass trends, so it's amazing. I'm so happy that, like, there are all these other restaurants around, and they're doing, that they're in fact helping us to make Bombay a dining destination, and
Yes.
that's how I see it, and and the more that you have restaurants that are focused on great quality, it's just reinforcing that hopefully Bombay is not just an overnight sort of pit stop on the way to somewhere else, but rather a
Yes.
place to sort of spend time and experience the amazing, like, dining. And the funny thing is that I remember this, we used to have, when you talk about Indian cuisine, and we used to have so many, I mean, we're obviously we're located in Colaba, which is a very touristy area, and we used to have so many people who would come in, probably at the end of their, like, 2-week yatra in Bombay, I mean,
Yeah.
India yatra, Bharat yatra, whatever, and they'd just be like, oh my God, I'm so happy to not have Indian
I
food.
know, I know,
And
I know.
so,
That's true.
yeah,
That's true. Yes.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
funny that, like, of course, so everyone has fulfills a certain need. And I think that you should just focus on doing that rather than being a jack of
Yeah.
all trades. Yeah.
Yeah, so I always say that when I do these interviews, I don't know about the viewers, but I always get so inspired. And I think that what you said right now is that you can't keep looking behind your shoulders, but instead focus on what you're doing is so reassuring to me as a content creator. And what you said, if I see in Bombay, there are also distances of issues. Sorry, issues of distance. I live in Bandra, so I don't eat out in
Yeah.
Colaba as often. But when I go to Colaba, like first port of call for me is Links Pavilion. Second port of call is the table. And I'm being honest. I mean that's
Yeah.
the sort of thing. In
No, but
Bandra,
that's the thing. Like, you have to. It's not like
no,
you have to
yeah,
come there and you have to eat this.
but
Yeah.
it is those two places, especially when I'm with my wife. When I'm by myself, I'll
Yeah.
be foraging in Fort and this thing. Yeah. So when I'm by myself, I'll be foraging in Fort or Churchgate or whatever. But with my wife, then table is her sort of place, and as is mine. Or back in Bandra, Saltwater Cafe, which we keep going back to. I mean, there are certain things are so which are timeless, and different people will find different things which are timeless. So thanks so much for sharing that message. I'm going to ask you one last question before I let you go. Though I wish I could make this talk a series, and maybe we should. But tell me a bit about the pandemic, and I'm not going to ask you that what the pandemic did to you and this thing, because I think we've dwelt a lot on that as an industry, and it's been 10 months. I'm more interested in stories of people who are now breaking through. So I would like to know, how did you as a group, because I saw you did various things like focusing on Iktara, the Max Street bakeries, and coming back with a table delivery menu, Misty. So from your point of view, how did you guys take on this situation, and what are the learnings there which you'd like
You
to
know,
share?
I mean, I have to say one thing. I was blown away at how our team responded. I mean, we are sitting in the comfort of our home, and,
Yes.
we have all the comforts. We're not, like, possibly fortunate enough to not be, like, dependent on our salary, possibly, and things like that. And we also, Jay and I were very aware of the fact that people were afraid, right? And
Hmm.
I'm talking about, like, early on April, May, where they're afraid for their lives, but they're also afraid for their financial stability. And we had to, for us, I mean, obviously for everybody, this was a completely like novel situation. But the way the team kind of rallied together to, in their own time, to do, without kind of feeling either that they had to do it for the business or anything. And then again, like I said, when, we were talking about, Alex moving on, and our whole job was to support them in whatever way we could. And, and I don't mean financially. So I mean, whether it was like me going into the kitchen and helping with packing every day, or, whatever, even what Jay was doing in his way. And I think that I was just so, I was so like proud to see how the team came together, because for me now, that when things are kind of getting back to normal, and sort of, sort of getting back to some kind of feeling more settled about things, I'm so happy to know that there are people here who are capable of taking charge and making difficult decisions, and rallying a team together, inspiring the team. And it's not just a mom and pop shop anymore, but that there are people who were able to handle a situation like this. I think for me, and you think people are ready in things, but I actually saw it. I saw it kind of come through. And I think even for them, all credit to them. We have our head of operations, Sushant, who worked his way up from being a captain in the table to, like, today being in charge of all our operations. And so something like that, I'm just, I'm so happy to see. I think that was our biggest sort of learning from, from this whole situation, was just to see how
and you also,
people took charge.
and that's this thing, and in fact I saw that in some of the other successful things about the way the team came together, this thing. And also you looked into your range of products. So even if your identity, the table dining in, stopped, you looked into your basket and then focused on other things and created new routes. I think that also worked, right? If you want to speak about some of
Yeah, I
that.
mean, that everyone was trying to figure out ways to, whether we
And
went
delivering
off
in
like
Alibag.
Alibag, yeah, so I mean, look, desperate times, desperate measures, right? But
Yes,
again,
yes.
without devaluing your brand, without compromising on anything. If there are things that you can do, then the mind works in mysterious ways to come up with new ways to generate revenue. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gauri. And like I said, I would love to keep chatting. But many congrats to you, to Jay, the entire team, past and present. I think everyone this thing. Hopefully, we'll talk again 10 years later, 15 years later. I don't know what 20 years, 25 years will hold, but I'm sure there'll be many more interesting stories and delicious dishes which are part of it. So thank you so much, Gauri.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Take care and best wishes. Bye.
Bye-bye.